Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange. Today I'm here to do a spoiler-free review of Violet by Scott Thomas. This is a book that I received an advance reader copy from the publisher, and I can't wait to tell you all about it. This is a book that follows a woman named Chris who has recently lost her husband. She, of course, is going through her own grief, but she is also worried because her daughter has become very reserved and quiet in the aftermath of her father's death. So Chris decides to take her daughter away and go to a family lake house in order to heal and move past their grief. This lake house has a lot of baggage for Chris because as a child, she went here herself with her father and her mother when her mother was dying of cancer and actually died within this house. So she is taking her emotional baggage and hoping that this will be a good place to revisit and move on in her life. So I think a lot of people are going to go into this one wanting to know how it compares to his first book, Kill Creek, because that book was quite popular a few years ago and definitely took the internet by storm. I personally have not read Kill Creek, not because I don't want to, but because it has not been available in my library system. But I do know enough friends that have read it that I think I'm aware enough of the book to give you a bit of a comparison. I understand that Kill Creek is a lot more fast-paced, and of course it has that meta or self-aware aspect to it because it is, of course, a story about horror writers. And this book does not have that meta aspect to it. And on the flip side, while Kill Creek was supposed to be fairly fast-paced for a haunted house story, this one is very much a slow burn. So I will caution people to go into this one expecting a very different story. If you are expecting another Kill Creek, you might be disappointed by your own expectations. Instead, this one is a very different piece of horror fiction, and I personally prefer that. I get tired of authors that tend to ride on the coattails of their previous work and just write the same story over and over again, hoping to keep going with that success. Instead, I appreciate that Scott Thomas wrote a story that is so different than his first and really took a chance on a very different kind of horror experience. So I will start by saying that this book came to me at the right time. I've said in the past that I'm someone who is a very plot-driven reader, but I am finding that my tastes in reading have changed. I was someone who didn't always care if there was good character development or didn't honestly care about the writing. If the plot would suck me in, then I was set. However, in the last year, I have definitely started to change what I appreciate, especially when it comes to horror fiction. And so I'm glad I read this book now because I don't think I would have fully appreciated it a few years ago because it is so slow paced. This book is nearly 450 pages, which is honestly longer than I normally gravitate towards when it comes to picking up horror fiction. I said before that I do prefer my horror on the shorter side, but despite the length, I did not find this book to be boring or bloated at any point. I really thought that the book was immersive from the beginning to the end. It is slower paced, but I was still gripped into the narrative. And I really like the fact that the author was able to create characters that I really connected with. The story, especially at the beginning, is very much the relationship between the mother and the daughter as they're going through their grief. I think he deals with a lot of really universal themes that will appeal to a lot of readers and potentially appeal to readers that don't normally pick up horror fiction. I do think this is the kind of book that can bring people into the genre that don't normally like horror, but I think this one has enough universal appeal, which is really exciting because I like those books that are good entry points. In terms of the horror elements themselves, they do take a while to get started. At the beginning, it felt more like reading a contemporary or general fiction story, again about this mother and daughter. But as the story got going, eventually you do start to see those elements come in, but they are quite subtle when they do. So I will say that this is a piece of very quiet horror, and when the horror emerges, it's mostly psychological. I like the fact that the main character is potentially unreliable. I'm going to leave that there, but you know that she is self-medicating with Xanax. She drinks a lot, and because she is so focused on her own grief, she tends to zone out at times. So we as the reader aren't necessarily sure how much to believe her as a character, and that definitely creates more of an ambiguous idea around this horror story. So if you're like me and enjoy a story that plays with the idea of, is there something supernatural going on, Or is the character potentially crazy or going through something? This one definitely has that appeal, and I was very much intrigued to see where it was going to go. Eventually, the story certainly does build, and I'll say that while I am calling this a slower burn of a story, the last section definitely picked up the pace. I was so gripped in. I was reading it very late at night, and honestly, I should have gone to sleep, but I just needed to know what was going to happen. I will not spoil the ending in any way, but personally, I found it very satisfying, and I thought it was a strong ending for a horror book, and I was very pleased with my overall reading experience. So to summarize, I would say that go into this book not expecting Kill Creek because it is a very different kind of story. So instead, look at the synopsis, look at the type of book, the type of horror that this is, and decide for yourself if that's the kind of horror fiction that you personally enjoy. I love this one. It was definitely one of the best horror books I've read in a long time. I have recently been reading a lot of horror that just had poor writing or weak characters, and this one was really the solution to a reading slump that I've been going through. It really cured that reading slump and just got me excited about the genre again. I will say that this is the best 2019 horror release that I have read so far this year, which is high praise because you know I read a lot of horror fiction. So I personally recommend this one, but to the right audience, as long as you enjoy quiet psychological horror that is a little more slow paced, a little more character focused, then you should definitely pick up Violet by Scott Thomas. So that is it for this video. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing. I post a lot of horror content on this channel, and I would love to discuss it with all of you. Please leave a comment letting me know if I persuaded you to check out this book. And if you have already read it, I would love to hear your thoughts down below, as long as you keep them spoiler free. Also, give me a thumbs up if you want to see more of these videos, because BookTube does not like review videos in those YouTube algorithms, so it really helps to make my content a little more visible online. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I will talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.